Let us clap to Jesus.
Hebu tumpige Yesu makofi.
Forever.
Milele.
Don't stop.
Usikome.
Don't stop.
Usikome.
I don't know how many people.
Sijui ni watu wangapi.
I don't know.
Sijui.
Only the Lord knows.
Ni Bwana pekee ajuaye.
How many million people?
Ni mamilioni ya watu wangapi.
Shoulder to shoulder.
Bega kwa bega.
Mighty Father.
强大的父神，
The God of Elijah and Moses.
以利亚和摩西的神，
Mighty Jehovah.
强大的耶和华，
You are my one and only friend.
你是我唯一的朋友。
Jehovah Elohim.
耶和华 Elohim，
Jehovah Elohim.
耶和华 Elohim，
I have no other friend.
看一下，我没有其他的朋友，除了你之外，耶和华。
This mighty meeting.
主啊，我们现在开始这强大的聚会，释放出来你的火，触碰这些引作员。
Mighty Father.
强大的父神，
Master from the altar.
洁净这祭坛。
I now release your fire to touch the pastors over there.
我现在释放出来你的火，来释放这些牧师们。
Whether you can now bring your fire and touch the pastors and touch, 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 touch. The women at the corner come out.
Mama aliyo pale kwa kona kutoka.
These women have come from Ibarua.
从巴若来的妇女们都
Close your eyes, the women from the Shamba.
从山巴来的妇女都 往前这边来。
Mighty Father,
强大的父
you are
神，
the Father of Naivasha.
你是乃巴萨的父，
You are the Father of these precious women.
你就是这珍贵的妇女的父。
In the field.
他们整天在田地干活，
Mighty Holy Spirit,
强大的圣灵，
I welcome you to visit this field.
我欢迎你来造访他们，
Visit these women
造访这些妇女，
and touch,
触碰他们，
touch, 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 touch. Touch them all. Touch.
强大的圣灵，
the God of Israel,
以色列的神，
the Father of creation.
创造的父。
I now welcome you
我现在欢迎你们，
to visit this house in a mighty way.
以非常强大的方式来造访这个地
Beginning
方。
from the worship team
从这个敬拜队开始，
and touch. Mighty Father,
强大的父神，
whether you love the worship team,
你爱这个敬拜队，
spoke to me about the worship team.
你和我说过有关这敬拜队。现在你来洁净他们，用火来触碰他们。
Lift up your hands very high.
Levante su mano bien, muy alto.
The fire of the Lord is going to fall here.
El fuego del Señor va a
你们
caer
的
aquí.
双手举高一点，主的火要降在这祭坛上。闭下你的眼睛，
Mighty Father,
强大的父神，
now you can clean up the worship team.
现在你可以洁净敬拜队，
Let your fire fall on this altar.
Que tu fuego caiga sobre este altar.
让你的火降在他们身上吧，触碰他们。
Mighty Father,
强大的父神，
now I ask you to bring your fire.
我现在带给
Very great fire.
求主带给他们火，
The dancers
触碰这些跳舞的，
and touch. Levanta sus manos muy alto. Beginning with the men towards the women.
Comenzando con los
从这个
hombres
男
hacia
人
las
开始到女
Father
人，
now,
父神现在，
you remove disease from the field.
al quitar de enfermedad
当你
del campo,
去掉这些疾病的时候，
Him.
就开始造访这些敬拜队。
de mi mano derecha,
Beginning with the men.
comenzando con los hombres.
Let the fire of Jehovah
Deja que el fuego de Jehová
fall on the worship
caiga sobre la adoración.
over there
Ven hacia allá.
and touch.
求主你的火来造访他们的敬拜当中。 强大的父神。现在你来向他们吹气。
I'm going to pass by you.
Ninaenda kupita karibu nanyi.
And the glory of the Lord will touch you as I pass by you.
Nitakapopita karibu.
我经过你们的时候，主的灵会触碰你们的。 父神从天国降临。
I am giving a prophecy here.
Ninatoa unabii hapa.
I see myself in a house.
我看过我自己在家里，
And when I'm in the house,
我在那个家里，
then
然后
the walls shake violently.
那个墙壁震动得非常的强烈，
And I was terrified.
我当时觉得很可怕，
And I began to run for my life.
然后为了我的生命而逃跑
And。I saw a lot of people also running for their lives.
然后很多人都为了救命而逃跑。
I don't know whether it's a building or so. I see down.
然后我看，
I don't know, 3 buildings or whatever. I see down.
然后我看到那个3个楼都被倒塌了，我都看到了。这是2014年1月1号，卡卡梅加肯亚在那里的预言有关地震即将来到非洲地区的。
I see an earthquake coming.
我看到地震要来了。
I see an earthquake coming
我看到地震要来，
around this region.
有关这个地区，
Even in Kenya.
甚至在肯亚，
Because I was in the house.
因为我在家里。
Violent shaking of the wall.
非常强烈的把那个墙壁震动了那个墙壁。主那可怕的先知拿地震来震动了东非地区，达到了5.9的强震。
This is CNN breaking news.
We're talking about northwestern Tanzania, where
东北地区的非洲5.9的地震发生了。
From that area to CNN, 11 confirmed fatalities so far. We also have at least 200 injuries that have been reported.
如今我们收到了200多个人死伤人员。
Was 5.9. It was just on the shores of Lake Victoria. I'll try and break it down for you so you can see exactly what people across this region have had to deal with over the past 12 hours, let alone the aftershocks that will be felt going
Victoria
forward.
湖水边的那个地
Just
区，
over 700,000 people that felt strong shaking, but get a load of this. Over 400,000 either felt very strong or severe shaking from this magnitude 5.9. That had a lot to do with the very
就是
shallow nature of the
超
earthquake.
过5.0的强度以上的地震呢，可以让
7 people are dead from an earthquake in Tanzania. The
坦桑
5.7
尼亚
quake occurred in Lake
很多的
Victoria
人
area
因为
of the
地
East
震
African
而
country. Tremors could be felt as far away
受
as
伤，并
Rwanda.
且死亡人数
Just moments after the full force of the earthquake struck, dust could be seen rising above the city of Bukoba in Tanzania.
No way.
坦桑尼亚的地
People were
区
then left to pick through
地
the
震发
wreckage of their
生，
homes. Many buildings have been destroyed, others rendered uninhabitable, and the community here is in shock
很
of
多
what
的
has happened.
住宅地区的楼都被倒塌下来。
I felt a big quake when I was on the road. We had to run. We thought it was
2014年
thunder.
1月1号给出的预言，2016年9月10号得以实现。我看到家都被震动，都被倒塌了，墙壁都
Several hundred
破
people
坏
have
了，
been injured. Some were
甚至
treated in
700个
South
以上
London
的
hospital.
人员
Others
受伤。
wherever possible, with the priority on giving help to those most in need. The shallowness of the quake made it all the more powerful. Tremors could be felt more than 100 kilometers away in neighboring Kenya and in Rwanda.
就是就肯亚和卢安达周围，很多人都感到这个震动。我当时抱着我的孩子，然后我开始感到有些力量从我的背上就推我起来。 然后就整个楼、整个家的墙壁都被震动起来。
At least 13 people have died and nearly 200 others injured in northern Tanzania after a
坦桑尼亚的
5.7
北部
magnitude earthquake. It
起
struck
码
around 40 kilometers from Bukoba,
几十个人
located
死亡，
close to the
上百
border
个人
with
受
Uganda
伤。
and Rwanda near Lake Victoria. Images
就
from
是
the city
卢
showed
安达附近
extensive
的
damage to
Victoria
buildings.
湖水那儿。
A 5.7 magnitude earthquake hit Tanzania on Saturday afternoon. According to the U.S. Geological Survey, the quake hit northwest Tanzania, 44 kilometers from Bukoba, close to the western shore of Lake Victoria. The quake, which was recorded at a depth of 10 kilometers, was felt throughout East
这个
Africa's
Victoria
Rift Valley.
湖水
Reports
发生
indicate
的
several
地
houses have been
震，
damaged.
震动了肯亚、坦桑尼亚和这附近的3个国家。
5.7 magnitude quake, according to the U.S. Geological Survey, was felt in Rwanda, Burundi, Kenya, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and Uganda. Although minor damage was observed, in Uganda many houses were demolished, roofs blown away, leaving people homeless. In Tanzania, at least 270 houses were demolished and electricity cut off. I have nowhere to go. My house was razed. I sought refuge with my brother, but his house is also demolished. At least 16 people were killed and 250 injured in the province of Kagera in northwestern Tanzania, the epicenter of the earthquake.
以利亚主可怕的先知已经警告了，说墙壁非常暴力性的被震动，然后都会。
I see myself in a house.
我看到我自己在家里。
And when I'm in the house,
我在家里的时候，
then
然后
the walls shake violently.
那个墙壁非常强烈的被震动。
And I was terrified.
我当时觉得很可怕。
3 buildings or whatever, I see down.
我看到了前面的3个楼都被倒塌了。
Violent shaking of the wall.
非常强烈的被震动，确实是的。圣经的这可怕的先知以利亚所说的一样，非常强烈的震动了很多楼的墙壁。
The house shaking. I found that the children had already fled, and I stood there where the wall had collapsed. I entered the door and the wall fell on me and hit me on the head and arm.
These youngsters lived at the Ucho orphanage. When the earthquake struck, the walls of the building crumbled around them.
当地震击打的时候，我看到我的家，然后前面的那几栋家的墙壁都被震动。 都被毁灭了，都被破坏了。
And I saw a lot of people also running for their lives.
nikawaona watu wengi pia wakikimbia kuokoa maisha yao.
很多人都逃跑，提到了这暴力性的震动发生在东非地区的，导致很多人都逃跑。 为了救命而逃跑。
I felt a big quake when I was on the road. We had to run. We thought it was thunder.
我们在街头上遇见了这个地震，我们都逃跑了。为了我们自己的生命，都逃跑了。
Tremors lasted just over a minute. Buildings trembled, sending people running.
肯亚也会受到这个震动。先至提到，我看到地震要来到。我看到地震要来。围绕着这个地区，甚至在肯亚、坦桑尼亚，然后也可以感到在肯亚和乌干达，包括肯亚。 先知预言的每一句子都得以实现。
There was some shaking and trembling all over, and people were scared, and they were moving left and right, and they were confused.
人们都逃跑。
The 5.7 magnitude quake, according to the U.S. Geological Survey, was felt in Rwanda, Burundi, Kenya, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and Uganda.
Now, the earthquake was felt as far away as Rwanda, Burundi, Uganda, and
Burundi,
Kenya.
Uganda, 肯亚这个地区都受到了这场地震的影响。马拉基4章5节，看一下，我会差遣我的先知以利亚，在那讲到可怕的日子来临之前，他会把父母的心回到他的子女，把子女的心回到他的父母上，不然我会毁灭那个土地，彻底都破坏。让列国悔改，回到圣洁里去。2011年8月23号，主最可怕的先知提过，如果他们没有悔改，这地震确实是要发生。父神那可怕的愤怒会击打他们。拿着最可怕的地震的方式来，那人们会当他们没有注意听以利亚最可怕先知的命令的时候，他确实是拿地震来击打他们，难以忍受的神的愤怒。这是可怕的地震，暴力性的击打了从 Virginia 到白宫到纽约城市。一直以来，主要来证明主最可怕的先知，两位先知确实是来到地球上。主说了，这是非常紧迫的事情。在那个时候，一切可憎的行为，主要请你们悔改。
Historic earthquake visit the U.S. The Lord is asking for repentance. So the televisions are going to report how this earthquake will have happened.
并这地震发生了，新闻媒体那个电视都会报道这个地震的发生，并且主最可怕的先知以利亚在电台直播来，又播放了有关这个。我给你们的这个信息是神的宝座那来的，是很大的地震。击打，人们在恐惧当中都逃跑，说：“看， 这会持续到42秒以上的地震。因为这个美国失败去悔改的时候，确实是这地震3个半小时之后就发生了，击打了美国。
Shook violently as the quake sent snipers on the roof scrambling.
强烈的被震动。
We were on board an Amtrak train to D.C. when suddenly Union Station, the train station, started shaking violently. Officers yelling to us and to everyone to get out. As passengers ran to safety, there were immediate fears here that this was something worse.
Products leapt off the shelves in supermarkets. The powerful tremor lasted 30 seconds.
This grocery store captured the 5.8 tremor as it knocked goods from shelves.
I feel movement of the earth, and then silent, and then again another time so far, and then a very noise, boom, some like bomb.
Throughout the Washington area, office buildings were evacuated, leaving workers literally shaken.
All of a sudden, you felt the floor rumbling from under your feet, and when I stood up to go see what it was, the whole building just shifted like that and shook.
Some feared the worst.
I thought it was an explosion and terrorist attack. Never would I ever think earthquake in D.C.
The ground actually lifted up under my feet, and it was kind of compared to a roller coaster ride where you lose your weight for a moment. You know, you feel weightless for a second and then drop back down. That was the effect of it.
先知以利亚来警告他们蔓延的性罪。他们的叛教，这一切会引起神的愤怒，然后主最可怕的先知给出的预言。过了4个小时就得以实现。主的先知要求了要悔改，不然会拿地震来要震动他们，击打他们。这是2011年8月23号，就最可怕的先知在列国前发表的预言。没有悔改的时候， 确实是在这4个小时之内，神的愤怒，神可怕的愤怒，非常可怕的地震的方式来掉在他们土地上。今天8月23号
of the month of August, the year 2011.
2011年
The Lord God Almighty,
主强大的
the God of
神
heaven,
天国的神，
the creator of all the universe,
整个宇宙的创造主，
the blessed one of Israel,
以色列蒙福的神，
the God of Abraham,
亚伯拉罕的神，
the God of Isaac and Jacob.
以撒和雅各的神。
He has spoken with me about a historic earthquake
他和说
that
到
is
了
going
历史
to
性的地震
befall the earth.
会发生
And
在
in
地球
that
上。
conversation of the
在那
Lord
个
today, this afternoon,
对话中，主在
so
今天的
this
下午，
message I'm giving you now is
这个信
red
息现
hot,
在我给你们
coming
的，
from the throne of God this afternoon.
这个下午
And
从
then
神
the
的宝
Lord
座那
showed me a huge
出来的信息
earthquake,。and
主先给我
Lord
个很大的地震，击打地
and
球。
people were panicked and trembling and running up and down. And they said, I heard people saying, look, it has gone on for more than 42 seconds.
人们都
And then
逃
I
跑，
see
然后他们
people
惊慌当中说：“看一下，
One
这已
lady
经超
ran
过
to the
42
TV to a room where there was a TV, and they showed how the earthquake
42
struck,
秒。
and people were panicked and trembling and running up and down. And they said, I heard people saying, look, it has gone on for more than 42 seconds.
人
And the
们在
news
惊
was
恐当中都
reporting
逃
that on
跑，
TV, how this humongous earthquake shook the entire city.
然后他们
Tremendous
说
earthquake.
看一下，已经超过
It will
42
take
秒
place
了
in the west.
这强大的地震，他们都通过
And then I
电
heard
视
the voice
播
of
放。
those who were saying, look, this earthquake has taken place in this valley. They are talking about the whole of this valley.
整个这个谷
So there is a tremendous historic earthquake coming to visit the beautiful city with very tall buildings,
强
the
大的地
skyscrapers.
震要来击打这
It
个非
will
常美
take
丽的
place in
城
the
市
west.，
那有一个
The
很
Lord
高
has spoken with me just a few hours ago
大楼
that the nations of the earth may prepare, that they
列国
may
要
be
悔改
aware that Jehovah has spoken. The God of Israel
好
has
让他们知道
spoken. Elohim,
这是耶和华亚
Yahweh.
威他自
His
己说
name
的，
is Adonai.
他的
He
名
has
字就是阿多
spoken.
乃。
There is going to be an earthquake,
他说了
even
地震要
according
发
to
生。
Matthew chapter 24, verse
马太
7.
福音24章
There will be
7节，
famines and
那会有饥
earthquakes
荒
in
和地
various
震，
places
到处都
in
发生。
these last days.
在这幕后，
These are the signs
这
that
是个
the
征兆，
Messiah is coming.
弥
It's
赛
a
亚要
city
来的
with
征
tall
兆。
skyscrapers. It will take place in the west. And the earthquake, when it takes place, panic,
地震发生了，那个惊恐、
running,
逃跑
anxiety, fear.
和恐怖。
I am announcing the coming of a tremendous earthquake,
我要
a
宣布强烈
historic
地震，
temblor. It's going to happen in the United States. I have
记
seen
者
the
地震
sexual
要来
sin in
到
that
美国
land.
我看
I
到了
have
美
seen
国那
the
有性
gospel
罪
of prosperity
繁荣福
preached
音
by the pastors, the homosexuality, the gay
那同性恋
marriages. I have seen everything
牧师们的
abominable
腐
in
败
that nation.
在那个国家
The
举行
Lord
的
is
所有
asking for repentance.
可憎的行为，主要求你们悔改。这个预言马上在耶稣数据广播电台的网页贴上去了。那2011年8月23号，东非时间5点18分，那个下午5点18分，然后马上发表在 YouTube。历史性的地震要发生在西方世界，就是2011年8月23号。然后1个小时之后，也发表在脸书的有根网页上。8月23号，2011年上午11点10分， 的预言。然后，东非时间7点20分下午，就以利亚可怕的先知，就预言的视频直播的现场直播的发表了。
Today being the 23rd of August,
今天8月23号
the year 2011,
2011年
the Lord spoke with me this afternoon, just a few hours ago,
就是这个下午几个小时之前就和我说了有关很强大的事情发生在地球上。
And in that conversation,
在那个对话中
the Lord, He took me to a clinic,
把我到一个
and
医
there
疗
is this
机构里，
doctor,
这个医生
a woman doctor
这个
who was
女的
treating
医生
people. I could see
处理这
her
些
patients waiting. I can
病
still see
人
them， actually.
我看到那些好多
I
病
can
人在
see the
等着，
patients waiting at the
我看到
at the
他的
waiting room,
患者
and
病
she's seeing the
人都
patients
等待
in
着，
one by one.
一个一个的都
And the
坐
Lord
在他的
brought me into that clinic, and then all of a sudden,
然后突然
as I was there,
我在那儿的时候，
a huge earthquake
很大的地
took
震
place,
发生了，
a big temblor.
非常大
And
的
I
地
had
震，
everybody weeping and wailing and saying, look, it has gone on for more than 42 seconds.
所有的人都哀哭，
This was urgent.
痛苦的说到，看一下这个
And
地震
then
已
I
经
saw
超过了
people
42
running.
秒，
I saw them
我看到
running,
人们都逃跑，
looking for any kind of information on this historic temblor.
他们
And
要
because
寻找
I've
任何有
spoken
关
these
这
things
很大的
today
地震有关的信
with
息。
my prophetic tongue,
我
the Lord is asking for repentance. This was urgent.
这是非常
I have
紧
seen the
迫的主
sexual
正在
sin
要
in that
求
land. I
我
have
看
seen
到
the
那个国
gospel
家的
of
性质，
prosperity
他们的繁
preached
荣福
by the
音
pastors, their homosexuality,
被牧
the
师
gay
传讲
marriages.
他
I
们
have seen
同性恋
everything
他们
abominable in
同
that
性之间的
nation.
结婚，在那国家里头会举行的所有的可憎的行为，就要请你们悔改。可是美国失败了，
Now there is going to be a massive historic earthquake visit the U.S. I am announcing the
非常
coming
历史
of
性
a
的大的
tremendous
地震要
earthquake,
造访美国，
a historic temblor.
历史
It's
性
going to
的
happen in
大
the
规模的
United
地
States,
震
and I
要
had
记在美国
everybody
了。
weeping and
所有人
wailing
都
and saying,
哭
look, this has
看一
gone
下
on for more than 42 seconds.
这地震已经超过了42
And
个
then
秒
I saw
，42 秒
people
了。
running,
我看到人们都逃跑，
and the televisions were reporting
电视在
how
报
the
道说
earthquake happened.
怎
So
么样
the
这地震发生，
televisions
电
are
视
going to report
就要
how
报
this
道
earthquake will have happened.
怎么样这个地震发生的。
And I heard
然后我听
people
到
saying
人
that
们
the
说，
entire valley has been totally shaken by God,
整个谷
shaken by the
被这个地
temblor.
震被神
Let me tell you,
震
precious
动了
people,。
让我们说
the
一个
Lord
蒙
is
福的
asking for
人，要
repentance.
求你们悔改。
This was urgent.
这是一个紧迫
I
的
am
要求
announcing。the coming of a tremendous earthquake,
我
a
现在宣布
historic
强大的地震，
temblor.
历史性的
It's
地
going to happen
震
in the United States.
要
I
来
have
到
seen
美
the
国，要记
sexual
得美
sin
国
in
了。我
that
看到
land. I have
性
seen
罪
the
在那国
gospel
家
of
里，那
prosperity
个繁荣福
preached
音
by the pastors, the
被
homosexuality,
牧师传
the
已
gay
经传
marriages.
遍
I
了
have。seen
然后那个
everything
同性之间的结
abominable
婚，
in
所
that
有一切
nation.
可憎的行为，在那个国
The
家
Lord
举
is
行的
asking
主
for
要求
repentance.
你们悔改。然后他们失败了，顺服以利亚先知的命令的时候，他确实是拿着神的愤怒来击打了他们。3个半小时之后，这个预言得以实现。8点51分东非时间，这就是紧迫的。这样一来就击打了他们。 23号针对美国的地震的预言，过了4个小时得以实现。
The eastern seaboard was jarred today by one of the strongest earthquakes ever recorded in the region. The U.S. Geological Survey estimated more than 12 million people felt the quake.
There were fears of a terrorist attack in New York and Washington today as the cities were rocked by a strong earthquake. It hit mid-afternoon, surprising residents along the East Coast.
A TV camera trained on the White House shook violently as the quake sent snipers on the roof scrambling. Bricks toppled from buildings, showering cars and footpaths. Products leapt off the shelves in supermarkets.
All of a sudden, the whole entire house started shaking. The dogs started running. Pictures started falling.
And I feel movement of the earth, and then silent, and then again another time so far, and then a very noise, boom, sound like a bomb.
The floor rumbling from under your feet, and when I stood up to go see what it was, the whole building just shifted like that and shook.
Both the Pentagon and the Capitol were evacuated.
I thought it was an explosion and terrorist attack. Never would I ever think earthquake in D.C.
The epicenter was in Virginia, but the quake was felt across a dozen states. In New York City, tens of thousands streamed out of rocking skyscrapers.
The whole building started shaking. Then we got up and we started shaking. Everybody was screaming.
Airports were closed for hours. 2 nuclear reactors shut down. Media conferences were interrupted as reporters raced for the door.
政府举行着的那个记者采访会见都被取消了。5.8的强震击打了美国。
Now there is going to be a massive historic earthquake visit the U.S. The televisions are going to report how this earthquake will have happened.
This is a CBS News special report.
We are interrupting the programming this afternoon because of a rather unusual event. There has been an earthquake along the eastern coast of the United States, an earthquake that has been felt from Virginia all the way up to Massachusetts. It was felt all up and down the eastern seaboard from Virginia to Massachusetts. The U.S. Capitol building and the Pentagon were evacuated.
I feel movement of the earth and then silent, and then again, another time, so far, and then a very noise, boom, sound like a bomb.
Throughout the Washington area, office buildings were evacuated, leaving workers literally shaken.
All of a sudden, you felt the floor rumbling from under your feet, and when I stood up to go see what it was, the whole building just shifted like that and shook.
Some initially feared the worst.
I thought it was an explosion and terrorist attack. Never would I ever think earthquake in D.C.
At the Justice Department, Attorney General Eric Holder says his first thought was terrorism.
Fire Lieutenant Floyd Richardson.
I can say we were sitting in the firehouse and all the walls started shaking and I was sitting in the chair started jumping up and down. It was just something that, I don't know how to explain it. It's just like people say, it's like a bomb going off around you.
As many as 12 million people felt the biggest earthquake to hit the East Coast since 1944.
At 1:51 in the afternoon, everything started moving. A 5.9 magnitude earthquake jolted much of the East Coast, from Massachusetts to Ohio to Georgia. The U.S. Geological Survey said the quake occurred in central Virginia, about 165 kilometers south of Washington, D.C. It's the most severe quake in the area. Buildings shook. Workers in the nation's capital streamed out of their offices.
All the birds got up at one time and flew off, and that's when the ground started shaking, and you can see the buildings over here started shaking.
We interrupt this program for breaking news from ABC 11 Eyewitness News.
5.8 earthquake reported outside of Richmond, Virginia. The shaking was felt actually right here in the Triangle. We felt it here in the newsroom. I was in our parking garage and the pillars were shaking in there. It was also felt in Washington, D.C. and as far away as New York City.
Channel 5. Powerful earthquakes centered in Virginia shook from the Carolinas to Martha's Vineyard and beyond.
It was just after lunch when things began to shake along the eastern seaboard, the powerful quake rattling buildings and nerves.
I could see the buildings moving side to side, and I was like, oh, okay.
The quake was centered northwest of Richmond, Virginia, and was felt as far south as South Carolina. Even in Chicago and Detroit, there was shaking, and also shook to the north in New York City, where crowds felt it in Times Square, and the floor of the New York Stock Exchange cleared out after the tremor.
But what's a little bit unusual about this one is the size of the event, so this is significantly larger.
The 5.9 quake is the largest recorded in Virginia.
A huge earthquake on the northeastern seaboard area of the United States. It appears to have been centered in a town in southern Virginia, around the town of Mineral. It's about 85 miles south of Washington, D.C., and it was felt all the way from North Carolina right the way up through Washington. They evacuated the Pentagon and the White House there.
The quake centered about 100 miles south of Washington, hit just before 2 in the afternoon.
The whole building was shaking, the whole block was shaking.
Workers in downtown Washington office buildings quickly flooded into the streets.
We were in the restaurant and the whole, it just shook the roof. I mean, the ceiling, the floor, everything.
It was felt as far away as Manhattan.
Now there is going to be a massive historic earthquake. Visit the U.S.
The room shook during a news conference in New York City as a 5.9 earthquake struck the East Coast. Everyone ran out of the room. People from North Carolina to New York felt the ground shake.
The whole building started shaking. Then we got up and we started shaking. Everybody was screaming and we all got dizzy and then we just ran out.
The earthquake forced thousands of people into city streets as buildings were evacuated.
It was a surreal experience.
The U.S. Geological Survey reports the epicenter was between Charlottesville and Richmond near Mineral, Virginia.
To our other big story, a 5.9 magnitude earthquake rocks the East Coast.
In Washington, the Pentagon was evacuated for a time, as was the State Department. Office workers flooded downtown streets.
The floor started to shake. Really seen the chandeliers move, but when the floor started to shake, I couldn't really stand. Yeah, I could barely stand, and I started just to run to the top.
It started shaking a little bit more violently, and everybody stood up, walked into the hallway, trying to figure out what to do.
I was in my office, and I thought it was like a terrorist attack or something, and so I was pretty scared.
And even with Congress on recess, thousands of staffers still at work fled buildings on Capitol Hill.
First you heard the shaking and the stuff moving, and then, you felt the ground shaking, but then it just, everything just shifted all of a sudden. It just, then you heard people just like, screaming, get out the building.
Mobile communications networks were quickly overloaded as millions called, texted, tweeted, and overtaxed the airwaves. There were some
就最强大的先知提到了这场地震会成为历史性的。
Now there is going to be a massive historic earthquake visit the U.S. This is most historic.
The century earthquake rocked Virginia Tuesday, rattling high-rises in the state capital and shutting down 2 nuclear power reactors within 10 miles of the epicenter.
The ground actually lifted up under my feet, and it was kind of compared to a roller coaster ride where you lose your weight for a moment. You feel weightless for a second and then drop back down. That was the effect of it.
All of a sudden, the whole entire house started shaking, the dogs started running, pictures started falling.
The surveillance camera inside this grocery store captured the 5.8 tremor as it knocked goods from shelves. After it was over, the aisles were impassable. In Richmond, workers rushed from office buildings that swayed and shook as the earth rumbled. About 250 residents were evacuated from this high-rise for the elderly after reports of buckling bricks and a damaged stairwell.
I saw the windows and the blinds moving back and forth, and like the sofa shifting back and forth, and I came on out of my apartment.
We were pulling into the train station in Washington, D.C. when the station suddenly began to wildly shake. Officers yelling to us and to everyone to get out. As passengers ran to safety, there were immediate fears here that this was something worse.
The ground started shaking, people started screaming, running around.
All of a sudden, everything just shook. A couple of things fell off the table, and then everybody scrambled to the exits.
In Northern Virginia, cars smashed with falling bricks. In Baltimore, part of a warehouse collapsed. This was one of the strongest earthquakes ever to hit the East Coast. Even meteorologists were caught by surprise.
Why is everything shaking? Look at the lights.
Where the earthquake was caught by a supermarket security camera. And nearby, another store where the ceiling collapsed.
And then all of a sudden it sounded like a freight train was coming through and the ceiling started falling.
At the North Anna nuclear facility just miles from the epicenter, 2 nuclear reactors automatically shut down. In those moments when so many feared far worse.
那两个核物力发电机构自动的都被停止了。现在非常强大历史性的地震造访美国，这会成为最历史性的地震。 经最可怕的先知以利亚，当他预言的时候，当他的预言得实现的时候，美国的白宫都被震动，给他们一个确证，说最强大的先知已经来到地球了。
This is most historic.
In Washington, the White House, the Pentagon, and the U.S. Capitol were all evacuated as the buildings shook.
A tower cam overlooking the White House shakes as earthquake hits the East Coast.
A TV camera trained on the White House shook violently as the quake sent snipers on the roof scrambling.
The quake hit just before 2 p.m. with a magnitude of 5.8. Stationary cameras caught scenes of shaking from the White House.
The White House shook as the quake hit.
白宫都被震动得很强烈。电视台的摄影头能够拍下来。
About 80 miles north of the epicenter in the nation's capital, a static camera trained on the White House captured the tremors. People quickly evacuated buildings all over town.
The Capitol and national monuments were among buildings evacuated in Washington, D.C.
We're following breaking news right now out of Washington, D.C., where an earthquake has been felt in the D.C. area. The Pentagon has been evacuated.
All national monuments and parks in Washington were closed and evacuated as a precaution. The same was true for the White House, and much of the Pentagon reportedly evacuated as well.
Washington, D.C.
It's an eerie feeling standing on top of the Sky News building here in Washington with sirens howling around us. The streets are full of people evacuated from buildings. Behind me is the evacuated Capitol Hill building, completely empty of government workers. And over there is Union Station. As you can see, all the people that were in the station when this earthquake happened have had to be evacuated. They rushed out into the streets. A 5.8 earthquake on the Richter scale. Something you don't expect to happen in Washington.
The White House, the Pentagon, and the U.S. Capitol were all evacuated. As the buildings shook, workers in the nation's capital streamed out of their offices.
When the ground started moving, emergency officials evacuated the White House, Pentagon, and Capitol.
The senator telling me live that the ground literally shook beneath me.
I never felt anything like this. Everything started shaking. The desk, the cameras, the floor, everything around me. It was shaking so demonstrably that my papers, my bits, everything around me was just bouncing up and down.
Now there is going to be a massive historic earthquake visit the U.S. This is most historic.
And at Washington National Cathedral, the tops of 3 spires, gargoyles, and other decorative features came crashing to the ground.
Hunks of stone fell at the National Cathedral.
Washington's National Cathedral was cordoned off, and there was some damage apparent high atop its main tower. Structural engineers will evaluate the building this week.
Stonemasons in hard hats got a first-hand look at the damage Tuesday's earthquake did to the Washington National Cathedral.
Well, without a doubt, this top of the tower is the absolute worst.
The 5.8 magnitude quake knocked statues loose and sent capstones from the highest parts of the towers crashing down to the roof. The cathedral remains closed. Virginia's governor surveyed the damage.
There's going to be a long recovery period.
And at the National Cathedral in Washington, damage to 3 of the 4 pinnacles atop the tower.
Spires were damaged at the Washington National Cathedral.
The National Cathedral was closed after losing a chunk off its central tower.
The National Cathedral damaged, pinnacles falling to the ground. This woman tweeted, "I'm holding a piece of the National Cathedral in my hand."
The Washington Monument has been closed indefinitely whilst repair work is carried out following last month's earthquake. Visitors won't be able to go up the iconic tourist attraction. The monument is the tallest structure in Washington, the world's tallest obelisk, and the world's tallest building made of stone. The building attracts more than 800,000 visitors a year.
It's a symbol of America, instantly recognizable. 10,000 tons of pure marble, anchored into bedrock right below the swamp. The Washington Monument, once the tallest structure in the world, with those sweeping views of centers of power like the Capitol and Pentagon. It's brought us a bird's-eye view of some of America's biggest moments: inaugurations, Martin Luther King Jr.'s March on Washington.
It's an icon of this country.
An icon. An icon.
It is, and central to so many people's visits to D.C.
But the city's centerpiece set shuttered, closed to tourists for most of the past decade. 2011, a rare East Coast earthquake rattled the region, raining rocks on dozens of visitors who survived more than 2 terrifying minutes at the observation deck 500 feet up. The more than century-old monument didn't escape unscathed.
The earthquake damage was extensive.
Engineers rappelled off the top, providing this heart-pounding look down. And what they found scared the Park Service enough to close the attraction to tourists and trigger a $15 million restoration project. It was a monumental task to fix the massive marble obelisk with 36,000 separate stones, some cracked so badly the sun shone right in.
And engineers will be rappelling down the Washington Monument today to inspect cracks that opened up during earthquake. It comes as we see for the very first time just what it was like inside the monument when the quake struck.
This is how an earthquake looks 500 feet above the earth. Surveillance cameras throughout the Washington Monument captured August's 5.8 magnitude quake. As the obelisk begins to tremble and shake, confusion and then frenzy as tourists run for cover. Watch as this woman falls during the commotion. Others look up as chunks of monument rain down. A father looking for his son before running for safety.
And an aerial inspection of the Washington Monument revealed cracks in some stones. It's closed until experts can figure out the best way to fix it.
And this morning here, we're getting a clearer picture of the damage, that crack at the top of the Washington Monument.
The estimated 5.8 quake drove thousands from office buildings and train stations, even damaged national treasures, creating that crack in the Washington Monument's capstone.
In the nation's capital, the Washington Monument remained closed while inspectors analyzed cracks near the very top.
以利亚主最可怕的先知，这么震动了地球，来再一次的让你们集中的看好，追求好要预备弥赛亚来临之路。很大的地震要击打，人们在惊恐当中要都逃跑。
we were in a valley. The entire valley has been shaken by the temblor.
我们在
We were in a valley. The entire valley has been shaken by the temblor.
非常强烈的被这个地震震动。他们在新闻媒体提到，圣斯奎尔谷。
I heard people saying, look, it has gone on for more than 42 seconds.
我就看到人们都惊恐地说到，看一下这个地震已经超过42秒了，然后这个地震休息到45秒。
Now there is going to be a massive historic earthquake. Visit the U.S.
在美国发生。
book of Matthew 24 verse 7 says there will be famines and earthquakes in various places.
到处发生。
Right before the Messiah comes.
就是弥赛亚来临之前。
And that is part of the central prophecy Jesus gave to the church regarding the days right before he comes. Prepare the way. The Messiah is coming. And when these things happen, it shall be known that the mouth of the Lord has spoken, and that I am his servant. And that the Messiah is coming.
要来了，弥赛亚就要来。
And And there is this doctor, a woman doctor who was treating people.
在那儿
I could see her patients waiting. I can still see them
他的
actually.
患者都在
And she's
那儿
seeing
等
the
着
patients in
见他，
one
然后
by
看
one.
他就
And
一
the Lord
个一个
brought
的
me to
看
that
他的
clinic.
他的病人，然
And
后
then all of a
主
sudden,
让我看到这个医院，然后突
as I
然
was there,
我在那儿的时候，
a huge
很大
earthquake
的地震
took place.
发生了，
A big temblor.
很大的地震
And，I had everybody weeping and wailing.
然后我看到所有的人都哭，所有的人都哀哭、痛哭的喊叫，然后逃跑。
And so everybody can
And there
see.
is this
那kwa hivyo
doctor.
kila mtu anaweza
因此，所有
kuona,
的人，
Everybody can see the urgency.
kila mtu
所有的人
anaweza
都
kuona
在
udharura.
The Lord is in a hurry,
Bwana
主
yuko katika uharaka
在
and these
急忙
mighty
的
prophets of Yahweh are in a hurry.
那hawa
主这强大
manabii
主的先知
wakuu
也
wako
在
kwenye
急忙的
uharaka.
Everybody
说
can
导预
see that there
言，
is an urgency.
所有的人都能够看得到这个紧迫性，这预言
And
的
you
紧
can
迫
also
性。
see that the Lord has given me the ultimate authority and power of God to
并且
judge the nations.
并且你们都看到主给这两位先知身上给出了这最终的审判列国的权柄，
Face of the earth.
在地球上任何一个国家都能够
And strike
给他们
it down.
传达主的审判，能够击打
Nothing will be held back
他们。
for the coming of the Messiah.
为了弥赛亚的来临，没有任何东西能够
He died on the cross.
保留，因为他死在
And
十
the
字
Lord
架
is
上
very，much aware
没有任何
of
一
the
个舍不
disobedience
得。
of this generation.
因为主向这一代已经给出了充分的警告，
He is very much aware of their complacency and the way they slight things, they make things light.
因为主非常的清楚这一代多么的自以为满足，然后
So you
多
can
么
see
的
the monuments that the
对
Lord
待
struck. When finally sent
他们
Elijah
对待
to
神多么的
strike
减
the
轻。
USA with an earthquake. You
就
can
是
see the monuments he struck.
你们可以看到击打美国的这场地震是一个纪念性的、一个历史性的地震，
So these are historic times.
这是一个历史性的时间，
These are uncommon days.
这是一个不寻常的时
And
间
you。heard him say
你自己都听
that
到
in
看到，
this, it was a record time. He said, in a hurry, this is urgent.
这是一个要记录的，这些天是要
And
记
in
录的
record，time,
这是一个这些时间都要记录下来，因为他给出的只有4个小时的悔改。
when it was 3.5 hours and they have not repented, he went ahead and struck them before the 4th hour.
他等到了这个3个半小时的时间，就是他们没有悔改，他们神就马上就
He
开始
gave them
击打
4
了，
hours to repent.
就是给他们这4个小时悔改的
But
时
he could
间
not
而
wait.
已。
The wrath was boiling over me.
可是神的愤怒已经这个燃烧了，就不可能再等
The
待。
wrath of God
神的愤怒
was boiling over me.
已经浇灌在我身上，无法
The
等
Lord
待，
could not allow me to wait for 4 hours.
因为主不可能让我再等到除了4个小时，我只给他们4个小时
And
悔
when
改的时间而
3.5
已。
hours elapsed, I got up and struck them.
3个半小时等待之后，我就4个小时就击打了他们。 然后你都听到，当这个一切的事情发生了，那么你会知道主就是神，并且我就是他的仆人。你会知道在圣经里头，我说过这个宣布的，在加密山，弥赛亚要来了。谢谢你们。世界先进的医院就是 Johns Hopkins 医院。这个医生，女的医生，在那看患者的病，让我看到他的患者都在那等着他。他在那看自己的患者，一个一个的。然后呢，主把我带到那个医院里头。主和我说了，这是紧迫的。在那个国家，所有可憎的行为，主要求你们悔改。现在历史性的地震要造访美国，主要求你们悔改。因此，电视要报道这个地震怎么样发生。我现在给出的这个预言，从宝座那儿，就是这个从宝座那儿来的很大的地震，巨大，人们惊恐当中都逃跑。他们说，我看到人们说，这已经超过了42秒，这个地震已经超过42秒。
house shook violently as the quake sent snipers on the roof scrambling.
We were on board an Amtrak train to D.C. when suddenly Union Station, the train station, started shaking violently. Officers yelled to us and to everyone to get out. As passengers ran to safety, there were immediate fears here that this was something worse.
Shelves in supermarkets. The powerful tremor lasted 30 seconds.
This grocery store captured the 5.8 tremor as it knocked goods from shelves.
And I feel a movement of the earth, and then silent, and then again, another time, so far, and then a very noise, boom, sound like a bomb.
Throughout the Washington area, office buildings were evacuated, leaving workers literally shaken.
All of a sudden, you felt the floor rumbling from under your feet, and when I stood up to go see what it was, the whole building just shifted like that and shook.
Some feared the worst.
I thought it was an explosion and terrorist attack. Never would I ever think earthquake in D.C.
The ground actually lifted up under my feet, and it was kind of compared to a roller coaster ride where you lose your weight for a moment. You know, you feel weightless for a second and then drop back down. That was the effect of it.
And there is this doctor, a woman doctor, who was treating people. I could see her patients waiting. I can still see them actually. And she's seeing the patients in one by one.
然后他的病人一个一个的就进去，他们都在外边等着，就把我带到这个医院里头。突然，我在那的时候，很大的地震就发生了，很大的规模。我看很多人都在那哀哭。
when the Lord spoke with me, this was urgent. I have seen everything abominable in that nation. The Lord is asking for repentance. This was urgent. Hii ilikuwa ni ya dharura sana. And so, the time that is ahead here
我们眼前的时间
is difficult time.
是一个艰难的时间。
And that's why the Lord by voice on Friday spoke with me. By voice. I went like this by voice.
这就是为什么主亲口他自己的声音来和我说话，给我们警告的理由。上个星期五，
When he said,
当他说到
Go tell these people
回去跟他们说一下，
that when the rapture takes place,
当被提发生了，
the status of the earth will change.
地球的状态要改变了。
Up to 2 billion people will be killed.
2兆个人都被杀。 那带来疾病的骑士， 主，我在宝座的那个地位，宝座的时候，主差派的那个第4位骑士，那出来的第4个活物把他呼叫下来，然后他把第4位骑士我释放出来，他退水一次要访问了埃及，进入了那埃及里头的教会。 因为上面我看到了十字架，然后造访了希腊，走遍整个世界了。教会被提走之后，2兆个人会被杀。你们已经都看过了。2亿人，2亿人被杀，2亿，2个亿。 2个亿人被杀，你们都看到我呼叫下来的，我呼叫下来的冠状病毒，就是2009年7月29号被释放出来的第4位骑士，在他的管辖权之下的事情，就是释放出来。 那个灰色马的，那让我们直接的进入这冠状病毒的预言和这个是2015年12月1号给出的预言。然后呢，我要祝福你们，然后结束今晚的服事。 就和我说了，就把我带到一个亚洲的医院里去，在那有很大的一个，我看到在那装备很不够，医生都跑上去，然后跑下来，我就把我带到亚洲的医院去，很多病人都拥挤在医院里。有人跟我说，他们当时的一个医生跟我说，我们缺乏装备，并且我们需要培养病毒疾病带来的一个灾难情况发生，非常大的一个灾难情况发生在亚洲，这跟以前任何事情都不一样的这种。这几分钟前主先给我看的，就把我带到亚洲去。可是这种情况传达到整个地球的。这有一个暴风要来，地球的表面上，主出来了，拿着暴风而来。要击打地球了，因为他们的不公平，因为他们的罪孽，因为他们的抹黑，因为他们的亵渎，他们可憎的行为，非道德。哈利路亚！我看到艰难时期要来临了，然后2020年的1月份就来了。
An invisible killer is sweeping the world.
无法见到的杀人犯走遍了整个世界。
Killer is on the loose.
It came without warning, and it spreads like wildfire.
没有任何警告，像爆炸一样传播出去。
They're fighting a war here and they're losing. The sheer numbers of people succumbing to the coronavirus is overwhelming every hospital in northern Italy.
现在冠状病毒的患者都涌入到医院去，医院都被冠状病毒的患者住满了。
Reports surface of doctors having to choose who lives or dies.
现在医生都要选择，要拯救谁，要放弃谁，因为他们装备的不足。
Rispetto ad un altro più anziano, vedo i loro visi ormai davvero provati e quasi inespressivi.
Stretchers, row after row. Every surface is dangerous, and so is the air.
This is truly an unprecedented
因为这是空气当中能够传播出去这个病毒，没有差别任何人。
On this day, almost
所有的人都受到这病毒的攻击。
I've never seen a health crisis like this before.
Staff inside Houston's United Memorial Medical Center desperately working to keep this COVID patient alive.
1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Come on, good compression, people.
The grim reality across the South and West playing out in that tiny room in Houston as doctors and nurses pound her chest and pump air into the 66-year-old woman's lungs. The chilling video shot this week by the Associated Press. Her vitals started dropping at 11:47 p.m. By 11:52, like more than 130,000 American COVID victims, she was gone.
This is the scene outside my job right now.
This was the Lower East Side of Manhattan on Monday. A nurse from NYU Langone Hospital sent us this video. He told us there were 9 ambulances, all backed up, trying to get patients into the emergency room entrance.
Life on the front lines, in the epicenter of our country's pandemic.
The synchronized sound of ventilators is an eerie reminder of how dangerous this virus is. Doctors and nurses battling an enemy that
排列在一起的所有呼吸机告诉我们这个病毒有多么的严重。
You are not seriously sick.
如果你不是那么真正严重的一个疼痛当中，那你干脆再留在家里，不要那么随便的呼叫我们紧急救护车。那个纽约的某一所医院的9台紧急救护车，那一天整个都被这些冠状病毒患者呼叫出去。
The patient brought in earlier who coded did not survive. Everything possible was done for him.
所有一切可能的努力，为了拯救这个人的生命而进行。可是我看到艰难时期来临，我无法呼吸，呼吸本身非常的艰难。
It was like drowning on dry land.
Where are the ventilators?
呼吸机在哪
says
里
we're sending 400 ventilators. Really? What am I going to do with 400 ventilators when I need 30,000?
我需要3000台的呼吸机，可是你们只给我400个呼吸机，那剩下的2600个病人怎么办呢？让他们就死去吗？
The hospitals are full and the truly sick keep on arriving.
所有医院都被这冠状病毒患者住满了，所有医院的医疗系统现在能够承受住的一个限度都超过了。
We have a full ICU. We have every patient in here on a ventilator. Everybody has coronavirus.
Bergamo wanted us to see this to show what a catastrophic emergency nobody has experienced before looks like. Here they're calling it the apocalypse. And this is what it looks like. And their message to us is simple. Get ready.
Italy has reported the highest one-day death toll from coronavirus than any other country.
The sirens never stop.
意大利一天之内，为了这个冠状病毒而死亡的人数达到了最高的一个记录。
This is the next day. The morgue is already filling up. It seems absolutely endless. The next batch of the lost waiting for cremation are laid out in the hospital chapel before collection.
The worst hit town in northern Italy, they talk of a whole generation being wiped out. The healthcare system simply wasn't prepared for this.
There can be no funerals in Italy, only names in the paper, pages and pages of obituaries for those claimed by corona. The dead laid to rest unaccompanied, their mourning families, some of them millions, still stuck at home.
那意大利，他们肯定不可能举行每个死亡人员的一个葬礼。
Dozens of bodies were found in U-Haul trucks outside of a funeral home.
Neighbors witnessed it happen, complained rather of a foul smell.
This is going to traumatize this entire community that you had a U-Haul and a trailer full of bodies.
It should not reach to the point for the community to be alarming of a smell. For you to do something, because
这些社群都被这尸体腐烂了的臭味儿都受苦。
You have someone that you love, and this is the situation they find themselves in.
1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3.
They're dying in their beds here, and the numbers continue to rise. COVID-19 is ravaging Brazil.
因为冠状病毒而死亡的人数现在越来越增加。冠状病毒确实是破坏了巴西。
Grave diggers in hazmat suits don't stop digging. New graves full, more being dug. In Brazil, the
他们
health
就
service
挖
is
掉
ill
这个
prepared.
公墓
In truth, it's
来
already
处理
overwhelmed.
所有这
They
些
know this. They can't fight this virus. They're digging thousands upon thousands of graves
尸体。
in the city of Sao Paulo.
It is the nightmare we've all been dreading. The government failing us when we need it most, and the health system collapsing.
这是一场噩梦，国家要坚持的这个医疗系统都被破坏了、毁灭了。他们把自己亲人，就是亲人的尸体，3天5天的就藏在自己家里。
They're afraid of speaking out here. One doctor was prepared to talk to Sky about the government's failure and the backlog of bodies, but on condition we protect his identity.
Around the mortuary and the A&E, the smell was thick.
这围绕着这个公墓，这整个周围地区，这个尸体腐烂了的臭味，确实是太严重。
In normal times, 50 people die on average a day in the city. They've had up to 600
一般这个城市一天5个人死亡，现在上千个人就是无法承受得住，怎么处理这个尸体？厄瓜多尔正在冠状病毒达到了最顶点的这个危机情况。
We've been waiting 5 days. We are tired of calling, says this man, pleading with authorities to pick up a corpse still laying inside. Some feel forced to leave the bodies of their loved ones outdoors, fearing contagion as their corpses decay.
甚至有些人把自己亲人的尸体这么就丢在街头上。你们为什么把尸体放在这里呢？扔在这里呢？你们拿走吧。
Lamentablemente, como tenemos nuestro cadáver aquí, ya son 5 días, ya tenemos inconvenientes con los vecinos.
Son los olores que emana el cadáver, señores, que no, ya no se resiste.
Uno está desde las 5 de la mañana, estoy peleando su muerto 5 o 8 días. Están muertos allá al fondo, botados de 15, 20 días que ya la cara no se la conoce. Están reventados con gusanos, con todo.
No hay cajas, las cajas están súper caras. Yo creo que hay más fallecidos porque, como usted se da cuenta, aquí hay como 10 o 15 muertos. Gente esperando para poderlos enterrar. Nos dan una hora, pero no se cumple.
Antes, en Guayaquil, había alrededor de 35, en promedio 35 muertes por día. Hoy subimos a 150. Entonces, esos cadáveres que, como le digo, los manejaba antes la familia y las funerarias particulares, las tenemos que manejar ahora.
The world's largest COVID-19 lockdown is now in effect for India's more than 1.3 billion people.
All of Italy is now on lockdown. All of Italy is now on lockdown.
13亿人口都被这个冠状病毒引起的关闭受到影响。整个意大利的整个一切，西班牙这些国家都正在进行着这关闭的社会隔离措施。加福利亚。加福利亚 ，California， 加福利亚州都留在家里吧，都要关闭了，都要隔离了，整个国家、学校、街道都被关闭了。就是一个韩国的例子，一个超级的传播者，这个病毒传播者，一个人在教会里感染到上百个人。
like an apocalypse, a phenomenon around the globe, impacting pretty much everyone everywhere at the same time.
启示录的一个现象一样，末世的
Shops, restaurants, playgrounds,
这个
schools,
其实一样，所有一切都被关闭了，餐厅、饭店、学校、医院都被关闭，这个人对人之间的接触，现在非常危险了。
see a lot of people swarming into the hospital. The doctors are running up and down, and
很多人拥挤到医院里，医生
into the hospital.
都跑来跑去，很多患者都到医院来。
This is CBS4 News.
As COVID rages in South Florida, hospitals are flooded with patients.
They're fighting a war here and they're losing. The sheer numbers of people succumbing to the coronavirus is overwhelming every hospital in northern Italy.
This is Janet Shamlian in Houston, 118 kilos, where hospitals are buckling under a flood of new coronavirus cases.
You see a lot of people, many people flooding into the hospital. You see a lot of people, many people flooding into the hospital.
很多的病人都拥挤到医院来，所有医院都被冠状病毒的患者住满了，每个角落、每个房间。
Every inch of Brookdale Hospital Medical Center in Brooklyn now inundated with those suffering from COVID-19.
这个纽约的一所医院根本没有任何余地能够保持病床和病床之间的距离。现在所有健康的一个健康，现在所有的医院系统都被毁灭了，因为这冠状病毒的。冠状病毒患者的关系。
We have every patient in here on a ventilator. Everybody has coronavirus.
The hospitals are full and the truly sick keep on arriving. The only sound is the urgent movement of the medical teams and the machines keeping the patients alive.
唯一听到的声音就是紧急救护室里头的医院人员
City officials have called for a 2-week stay-at-home order as coronavirus cases continue to overwhelm hospitals there.
现在，冠状病毒仍然威胁所有医院的。
Intensive care units at more than 40 hospitals are at full capacity.
We had our 24-bed COVID floor. It was going to be
并且400个以上的人士，他们的家都被彻底的毁灭。
And the third floor, and now we're into a fourth and fifth floor, and we don't see it getting any better.
Drive-through testing centers in Florida have also been overwhelmed. There are reports that some have had to turn people away.
The surge in cases is flooding hospitals in hotspots like Phoenix.
We're at over 100% capacity, if that's possible. But every place there's a potential bed, we have a person.
This is the scene outside my job right now.
This was the Lower East Side of Manhattan on Monday. A nurse from NYU Langone Hospital sent us this video. He told us there were 9 ambulances, all backed up, trying to get patients into the emergency room entrance.
The Lord has spoken to me again right now.
主再次和我说话，就把我带到印度。
The Lord took me into a hospital in India. There's a very big distress.
就把我带到印度的医院里去，那个医院是非常大的。
Every patient and every doctor during Corona has a story to tell you, because we are facing lots of issues. Patients के relatives नहीं रहते हैं यहाँ पे, उनको ये तक पता नहीं रहता कि हमारा पेशेंट की स्थिति क्या चल रही है. हमें वो अपडेट करना पड़ता है. फैमिलीज कहीं और क्वारंटाइन है, पेशेंट कहीं और है, कोई कांटेक्ट नहीं हो पा रहा. नॉर्मल सिचुएशन के आईसीयू में हमारे पास अगर 10 पेशेंट रहते हैं, मे बी 5 या 6 को लगती है. कोविड में हमने ये देखा कि आईसीयू में एटलीस्ट जो हमारे पास पेशेंट है वो सब वैसे हैं जिनको सबको ऑक्सीजन की ज़रूरत पड़ रही है और वेंटिलेटर की ज़रूरत पड़ रही है.
Health authorities in India say the country has now exceeded 4 million coronavirus cases. Nearly 2 million new infections were recorded last month.
而且发表说，现在他们国家有400万以上的人口都被这冠状病毒感染了。印度现在成为这个冠状病毒有关，记录了世界第3位的一个传染速度。 已经达到了400万人口。主再度的和我说，主把我带到印度。主把我带到印度的医院去，那里有非常灾难性的事情发生。
in the news for all the wrong reasons. A video from a hospital in Sion has gone viral on social media. What it shows is how COVID patients are being treated in the same ward where lying only few inches away from them are dead bodies. Yes, these are dead corpses on the bed, even as nurses are walking up and down past these corpses, the ward checking up on COVID patients.
A shocker from Mumbai. A video posted on Twitter by BJP MLA Nitesh Rane shows coronavirus patients in a hospital ward lying next to corpses wrapped in body bags. This horrifying clip is from Sion Hospital, which is run by the city's municipal corporation. At least 7 bodies are seen in the ward as patients are being treated in adjoining beds. Some patients have family members attending to them, apparently ignoring bodies right behind them.
Multiple patients sharing a single bed. bodies lying in wards packed with patients. Wards used as morgue to store bodies. Mumbai's Sion Hospital's emergency wards are bursting at their seam with these horrifying images. Equally shocking video has come to light from another BMC-run KEM hospital in Mumbai's Parel area. Wards of the KEM hospital is packed with patients and their relatives. Patients and their kin lying on the floor as no bed is available. Many are without masks.
预言所提到的一样，现在我们无法提供任何一个病床。
is 45 dead bodies at LNJP, but with the increase in COVID-19 deaths, the mortuary was not able to handle the situation. In 1 week, 108 dead bodies were in LNJP, clammed one over the other. Let's go across to
现在这个城市能够承受得住的这个死亡人数和实实在在的每天发生的这个因冠状病毒而引起的死亡人数差距非常的大。
Well, that is right. The visuals are shocking to say the least, because the capacity of the LNJP mortuary is only 45 dead bodies at a time. But we are seeing that there were, in fact, in last 1 week, there were more than 100 dead bodies that were at the mortuary, and because of which, one after the other, it was getting difficult for the LNJP mortuary, for the authorities to deal with the situation. Now we know that there was, in fact, a number of, on one rack itself, there were 2 bodies that were kept, and there were around 28 bodies that were thrown at the passage, because there was no space at all to keep these bodies at the rack. There were few bodies that were around 80 of them were kept on the rack, because there are around 40 racks are there. So in each rack, Swati, there were 2 dead bodies. Accordingly, there were 80 dead bodies that were kept there, and the other, the rest of them were in fact left on the passage.
In a disturbing video that emerged on Tuesday, 8 bodies of coronavirus victims were wrapped in plastic and dumped into a common pit in Karnataka's Ballari district. Officials, while maintaining that the bodies were wrapped in plastic as per rules, said that the inhumane treatment will be probed. Chief Minister B.S. Yediyurappa termed the behavior of the staff inhuman and painful.
The disturbing visuals that have gone viral on social media. You can see shots on our screens at the moment of a group of men in hazmat suits dumping body bags into a huge pit. What really is going on?
Well, the DC of Ballari, S.S. Nakul, has confirmed that this, in fact, was the burial of 8 people who had died of COVID-19. Now, of course, very distressing, because many times family members cannot access the bodies of those who have died and cannot perform the funeral rites as per their wishes. But the DC confirming this was, in fact, disrespectful, as he put it, something he deeply regrets, the disrespectful handling of the bodies. This video has been widely shared, actually, and of course it's given a chance to the opposition in the state. The Janata Dal Secular, the Congress's D.K. Shivkumar, have tweeted criticizing the BJP government's handling of the entire COVID situation, using this as an example, in fact. The deeply distressing visuals, really. The remains of 8 people who died of COVID in Ballari district in Karnataka being tossed into a pit. The field team.
In a shocking case, a COVID victim has been abandoned outside a hospital in Bhopal on Monday night. It isn't clear from these visuals whether the patient was dead or alive at the time that he was abandoned. A Discom employee, he had been admitted with a kidney ailment. He then developed breathing trouble and was suspected to have pneumonia. He was diagnosed with corona on Monday evening. The hospital administration, it seems, was keen to shift him to a dedicated COVID
就是那个紧急救护车的司机放弃了得冠状病毒的一个尸体。
The hospital on a pavement, a magisterial probe has now been
并且预言提到全球的一个灾难情况发生，很大的这个疾病带来的很大的灾难情况会发生，这跟以前完全不同，就显给我跟
这个病毒再来的灾难情况会传播到全球的。
In Israel, there have been protests in Tel Aviv and West Jerusalem against the government's handling of the coronavirus pandemic. Police used water cannon in West Jerusalem trying to disperse the crowds. Israel reimposed restrictions after a surge in cases last week, something that's angered demonstrators. There have been protests for weeks over the economic situation and lockdown measures. There were also chants demanding Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu resign.
Thousands of Israelis protested in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem against what they see as a bungled government response to the coronavirus crisis. Israeli police fired water cannons to disperse demonstrators gathered outside his Jerusalem residence.
Violent clashes have broken out between protesters and police as hundreds illegally rallied against Melbourne's lockdown laws. The force was ready as tensions quickly rose amongst the group, branded selfish by the Premier. Mark Santamartino was there.
他们都反对戴口罩的、凹着的。
Demonstrators were picked off one by one to rounds of applause.
他们一个一个的都被抓住。
Handcuffed but far from gagged, their hatred for lockdown was laid bare.
Is this the future you want for us?
Moving early on the loudest only angered the growing mob, ditching masks and social distancing to link arms and stare down police reinforcements.
反对这些社会隔离的措施。
The streets of Spain's capital, Madrid, resound with the honk of car horns as thousands rally in the city. Protesters are calling for Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez and his deputy to resign over their handling of the coronavirus crisis.
他们就反对这个政府采取的有关冠状病毒的一系列的措施。美国的这个
Residents of this great state are smart enough, and more important, have the right to decide their own comfort level with any and all pathogens and viruses.
政府不要限制任何一个自由的一个基本的权利。
Hurling rocks, flares, and insults at the government. Protesters gathered for a second night across the Serbian capital, Belgrade. Security forces massed outside Parliament, keen to avoid a repeat of Tuesday's chaos, when some protesters managed to storm the building. But the tensions remained high, with more tear gas from police, some in the crowd intent on forcing their way inside again. Protesters blame President Alexander Vučić for a sudden spike in coronavirus deaths and infections after he'd lifted a strict lockdown just weeks before last month's elections.
Fireworks exploded in the streets and fires raged while armed police tried to disperse groups of protesters congregating in Vilna-Vlhegorren.
法国和德国这些人群都表示反对目前政府为了冠状病毒的为了控制冠状病毒而采取的所有社会隔离等等的措施。
This year, thousands used the national holiday to protest against the government.
Just
Argentina's government imposed a lockdown in March to prevent the spread of COVID-19. The lockdown has had a dramatic impact on the economy.
为了停止这冠状病毒的传播，政府决定了举行社会隔离。那这社会隔离导致了严重的经济倒退。那这些人们都反对这社会隔离的措施，让他们开放，是正常的运行所有经济的活动，所有经济活动。
荷兰、罗马尼亚。
I'm protesting because they're violating our human rights.
How are they violating your human rights?
By locking me down, by forcing a vaccine.
我们就反对他们强迫抵触我们基本人权的所有办法。怎么样妨碍了你们的人权呢？社会隔离措施，然后勉强的注入那些开发的疫苗，这样的方式都是不对的。这就是他们这些一群示威的人们他们的想法。
This kind of distress, like God has shown me just a few minutes ago, will develop on this earth, will throb on this planet Earth.
主说了，这疾病带来的灾难情况跟以往的任何事情不一样，并且这灾难情况传播到整个世界的。
Across the world, schools have been closed for weeks and even months on end. Making matters worse, no one actually knows for sure when they'll be able to reopen, as the coronavirus pandemic shows no sign of abating anytime soon.
Italy's government has closed all schools in the country.
This is CNN Breaking News.
School has just started. We're pretty much in some places in just the first week, and we are now hearing that in a Mississippi school district, the Corinth School District, now reporting that there have been several people who have tested positive for the coronavirus, and that has caused 100 students to have to be quarantined because of those positive tests.
Dès lundi. Starting Monday and until further notice, nurseries, primary and secondary schools, high schools, and universities will be closed.
This is an ABC News special report.
We're going to have the schools remain closed for the rest of the year.
The Lake County Health Department is telling us 36 Lake Zurich high school students have tested positive for COVID-19. Some students began feeling sick even during that first day of camp. And by Tuesday, the school's camps were shut down after being notified about several student athletes who tested positive.
St. Dominic High School has suspended all student activities through August 9th because of this outbreak. They sent out a letter confirming that 19 students have tested positive for COVID-19 and also 2 additional people who do not attend the school.
This morning, it's class dismissed at UNC Chapel Hill. Following a weekend of packed parties and growing COVID outbreaks, the university is reversing course, canceling all in-person classes just 1 week into the fall semester.
Seeing the COVID-19 positivity rate rise from 2.8% to 13.6% at Campus Health over the past week is very concerning.
Well, there are reports, Annalise, this morning that parents have been advised to go and pick up their students, their children from the school in Dundas in Sydney's West after 2 students, Year 10 students, tested positive for COVID-19.
That distress would be like none other. a distress that has not been seen. This kind of distress, like God has shown me just a few minutes ago, will develop on this earth, will throb on this planet Earth.
British Prime Minister Boris Johnson announced this morning
不
that he
同
has
以往
tested
的这
positive
灾
for
难，
the
这个疾病带来的灾难情况，会传遍整个地球。这个整个地球都会受到影响。这就是预言的内容。现在他们这些媒体，全球的媒体传播的信息就是，那学校都要关闭，就是学校不能面对面的正常的这个运营。他们都决定关闭。
Minister Arim Montero has tested positive. 212 prisoners have come out positive.
This morning, the nightmare at sea turning into a protest on the open ocean. The U.S. Coast Guard says at least 54,000 crew members remain aboard 85 ships in U.S. waters, but it's reported more than 100,000 crew members around the globe have been given no firm details on when they can disembark.
An extraordinary scene today as American sailors were rescued off their own ship. The Navy announced at least 93 crew members of the USS Theodore Roosevelt tested positive for coronavirus, with hundreds of results still pending. Secretary of the Navy said about a quarter of the 4,000 crew members have been tested so far.
The number of cases of coronavirus among the some 4,000 on board the USS Theodore Roosevelt had steadily grown over several days as it lay docked in Guam. The cramped, dense living conditions, a perfect viral incubator. And that led to this impassioned plea from the aircraft carrier's captain on Monday. We are not at war. Sailors do not need to die. If we do not act now, we are failing to properly take care of our most trusted asset, our sailors.
More than 6 million coronavirus cases in the United States. That's according to Johns Hopkins University.
现在美国呢，650万人口以上的一个人员都被冠状病毒感染了。
Iowa, North Dakota, South Dakota, and Minnesota have recently reported record one-day increases in new cases, while Montana and Idaho are seeing record numbers of currently hospitalized COVID-19 patients.
In just 3 weeks, the U.S. has added 1 million new COVID-19 infections, bringing its total number of cases to over 6 million. It remains the country hit hardest by the health crisis, accounting for almost a quarter of the world's total.
That distress will be like none other, a distress that has not been seen. This kind of distress, like God has shown me just a few minutes ago, will
几分钟前，主先给我看的这个灾难不同以往的，这会发展到整个全球范围内，会影响到整个全地。
This is a CBS News special report. I'm Anthony Mason in New York, where stocks on Wall Street plummeted again this morning because of coronavirus concerns. The Dow Jones Industrials fell more than 9% right after the opening bell, as you can see, down 9.71%, almost 10%, which means trading was automatically stopped for 15 minutes.
The coronavirus pandemic will cause the worst global economic fallout since the Great Depression almost a century ago. That was the warning today from the head of the International Monetary Fund.
This is CNN Breaking News.
The coronavirus pandemic has contributed to a major stock market sell-off, and today we saw history and high anxiety for investors here in the US. The Dow Jones plunged more than 2,000 points. That is how the Dow Jones ended the day. It is the biggest drop in a single day ever. So you're witnessing history being made here.
We'll be watching the opening of the North American markets this morning. Yesterday, a beating after fears that COVID-19 is going to clobber the global economy. The closing bell on Wall Street yesterday, well, it certainly sounded more like an alarm. Investors were taking their money and running for the hills. The Dow plunged more than 1,000 points in a single day for only the third time in its history.
Eurozone's two biggest economies are falling into historic recession.
Germany, Europe's main engine of growth, is now facing the steepest decline in decades.
This is the largest decline in Germany since the start of our quarterly measures in 1970, and twice as large as during the financial crisis in the first quarter of 2009.
France's central bank says the country enters recession with 6% drop in the first quarter.
I do not think I've hidden from the French people that this economy crisis can only be compared to the 1929 crisis in terms of severity, its global nature, and its duration.
You can see that certainly in the firms that are getting the worst of the hit today. Boeing isn't going to be able to sell as many planes because people aren't going to fly as much. Apple's lost like more than $200 billion in value in the since its last peak. And in that, we've seen, not just today, but a pretty ugly week. I mean, the Dow was down 3,200 points this week. These are steep, steep losses.
Data releases each day are underscoring the economic havoc wreaked on Britain and the world economy by the coronavirus lockdown. Businesses have shut, millions of workers have lost their jobs and had their wages cut, and savers and pensioners have watched their money diminish as stock markets tanked. Central banks responded by printing money and cutting interest rates to record lows.
The longer the lockdown goes on, the more chance there is of lasting damage to the economy, what economists call a scarring. And this is because quite a lot of businesses will become insolvent.
Car rental company Hertz declared bankruptcy, and your favorite childhood restaurant, Chuck E. Cheese, also went under. And economists say this is only the tip of the iceberg. Despite billions of dollars spent in government support and loans, legal scholars worry that bankruptcy courts will soon be overloaded, resulting in delays as many cash-strapped business owners will be forced to shut down permanently. There have been over 26,160 total restaurant closures, an increase of 2,179 since June 15th. That's according to data from Yelp. About 60% are permanently closed, with bars being especially hit hard. The retail industry also endured 26,119 total business closures, of which 48% were permanent. Beauty and spas, bars and nightlife, and fitness centers are also suffering the blow.
The airline industry has taken a major hit during this pandemic.
4 months into the global pandemic, the coronavirus has the nation's major airlines bleeding cash. Just a couple of months ago, airlines saw passenger levels drop off a cliff, down 95%.
As long as we see COVID-19 continue to
spread around the country, and we don't see a break in the infection levels, we're going to see real limited numbers in terms of people taking flights.
United Airlines now says it's losing $25 million a day. Delta sasays its daily cash burn rate is $27 million a day in late June, down from $100 million a day in March.
The Lord took me into a hospital. There's a very big distress there. You see a lot of people swarming into the hospital. I see the lack of equipment. Now there's no equipment. The doctors are running up and down. Well, he makes one of the doctors there to speak with me, and he says, "We don't have equipment."
Where are the ventilators? Where are the gowns? Where's the PPEs? Where are the masks? Where are they? What am I going to do with 400 ventilators when I need 30,000? You pick the 26,000 people who are going to die because you only sent 400 ventilators.
The World Health Organization is warning of a global shortage of coronavirus protective equipment, including masks and respirators that health workers use when treating infectious patients.
整个地区正在包括口罩和手套等的个人保护装备都在缺乏当中。这护士现在身穿的这个人保护装备都是赠送都被赠送而受到的。
Material for gowns is unavailable at any price, and continuing to supply protective equipment is not sustainable. Supply shortages in Sacramento forced 5 COVID testing sites to close.
World powers that are armed for the globe's biggest wars are now fighting for basic protective gear. France is reported to have seized masks meant to be shipped to Spain and Italy, and the U.S. is accused of diverting gear intended for the German police. An estimated 3.5 billion masks are needed by the American healthcare system to fight this outbreak, and there are not enough. And frontline workers risk being infected as doctors and patients are asked to reuse what they have.
Now, due to sudden jumps in numbers, states are facing an impending shortage of intensive care unit hospital beds.
Healthcare workers around the world are asking for help. They're in desperate need of more PPE, also known as personal protective equipment. Stocks of the critical gear are disappearing during the coronavirus pandemic. Doctors say they are rationing gloves, reusing masks, and raiding hardware stores.
Long lines for life's most vital element. Oxygen is in short supply for COVID-19 patients who are struggling to breathe.
Tonight, Arizona is down to the lowest number of available ICU beds since the crisis began. And in California, where infections are surging, medical workers are sounding the alarm about a shortage of protective equipment.
There will be a disease emergency. The stress of disease is coming. There will be a disease emergency.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. We begin with news about the new coronavirus outbreak. The World Health Organization has now declared it an international public health emergency.
I'm declaring a public health emergency of international concern.
I am officially declaring a national emergency.
All 54 states, territories, and the District of Columbia have declared a state of emergency.
The novel coronavirus outbreak is a public health emergency of international concern.
The Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez has declared Saturday a state of emergency for the next 15 days.
Of the 3 tiers in relation to the response level, alert, serious and emergency, the level had been raised to serious. Now, today, I'd like to announce that we are going to escalate it to the highest level, that is emergency. The Italian government declared a state of emergency.
In neighboring France, a state of health emergency has been declared in the last 24 hours.
Switzerland's Federal Council has declared a state of emergency until the 19th of April.
Mexico's deputy health minister declared a national public health emergency.
Declaring a state of public health emergency throughout the Philippines.
Declaring a state of public emergency throughout the Gambia.
Ethiopia has declared a state of emergency in response to the coronavirus pandemic.
I, Julius Maada Bio, President of the Republic of Sierra Leone, declare that a state of public emergency exists in the whole of the Republic of Sierra Leone.
I have today declared that the coronavirus presents a public health emergency in the United States.
A public health emergency.
A declaration of emergency.
State of emergency.
And to declare a state of emergency for our state.
Advance a proclamation of a state of emergency in the state of California.
I have officially done a declaration of emergency.
Today I'm declaring a state of emergency in Massachusetts.
That it is necessary to declare a state of public emergency.
I have signed and issuing a declaration of emergency.
他们都宣布这个疾病导致的紧急情况的一个措施。
Well, next one of the doctors there to speak with me, and he says, "We don't have equipment."
那个医生说的，我们缺乏病毒，缺乏
We don't have equipment. What we do is take
装备，
然后 take a little and put and culture.
要培养病毒。
scientists racing to find a vaccine.
So the minute we made the diagnosis of the first case in Australia, we knew how significant that was, and we knew that we wanted to culture the virus.
So what we're looking at are cells which have been grown in culture.
Biology will attempt to grow novel coronavirus in human cell lines, which will enable in vitro testing of potential drugs and vaccines against COVID-19. The research team will use iStem's human lung epithelial cell culture system, provided as part of its anti-COVID screening platform, to understand the molecular and pathological characteristics of the virus, with a view of establishing a rational basis to test potential drugs in vitro.
The Lord has come out
Bwana ametoka
with a storm
akiwa na dhoruba
to strike the earth
kuigonga dunia
for their iniquity,
kwa ajili ya udhalimu wao,
for their sin,
kwa ajili ya dhambi yao,
for their blackmail,
kwa ajili ya
for their blasphemy,
kwa ajili ya makufuru yao,
abomination, immorality,
usherati.
Hallelujah.
Kutawaka
on that day.
Katika siku hiyo.
I see difficult days ahead of you.
我看到艰难的事业就在我们眼前了，出来，拿着暴风来，要击打地球了，因为他们的不公平，因为他们的罪孽，因为他们的抹黑、亵渎、可憎的行为、非道德。哈利路亚！那一天。
The cloud of God is coming from heaven to visit the earth. So this appertains to New Zealand, the United States of America, Europe, everywhere. It's coming to earth. The cloud of God is coming. The cloud of God is coming.
神的命运要来了，美国、芬兰、南美 Conception 起来，一直到 Brisbane、Canberra。 真的，韩国印昌、博良、釜山、北京、上海，就来到地球上。是，这是信息是贯穿的，好让你们不要遇见那个时代，就提前迎接地球来证明这个事实，有关被提、有关弥赛来临之路的信息。
This is an NBC News special report.
Tonight, as millions of Americans search for comfort, places of worship are taking unprecedented steps. The church is suspending all...
Repent
and
prepare the way for the glorious coming of the Messiah.
为了弥赛亚荣耀的来临之日要预备。
And I see an earthquake. One of them is coming around this part of the world again.
我看到地震再度的要来到这地球的一个部分。
And so wherever you are, just repent, blessed people in Kenya, in your houses, repent, because I'm going to stand before the Lord.
因此，无论你们在哪里，就要悔改。肯亚，你们在哪里就要悔改。我仍然为你们而站在这里。
But I know He will shake you to fulfill my words.
可是我知道他会震动你们的，为了实现我的预言。
But the Messiah is coming.
弥赛亚要来了。
And I'm going to pray for this land.
我为了这个国家会祷告的。
And then, so that it does not shake, because the two prophets are here.
不会那么震动，不要震动，因为两位先知在这里。
But the Messiah is coming.
可是弥赛亚要来。
Everyone needs to repent.
所有的人都需要悔改。
And return to righteousness.
要回到公义里去。
And these are the days to be right with the Lord.
这就是主已经写好了的日子。我们星期三再见，耶稣爱你们。
The Messiah is coming.
弥赛亚要来了。
Thank you.
谢谢你们。